Humans are weird peanut butter and fam. "What has you so pensive, Two Trills?" 13th Click asked as they darted around a particularly dense cluster of needle-like leaves. "Is the laboratory nature of the forest freaking you out again, as the human friends say?" The massive forest stretched around them, monotonous in its conformity. One of the humans' first extrasolar terraforming projects, this forest was one of the giant mammal's proudest accomplishments. It was impressive. Even judged by the standards of the great forests of the winged homeworld, these fir trees were massive. Their lower branches alone were massive enough to count as decent-sized trees in their own right. The rough split bark offered innumerable comfortable perches. The scents that drifted from the internal fluids of the trees were heavenly. The extensive bryophytes that adorned their upper branches were delightful gardens. It was impressive and disturbing if you didn't strictly focus on a single tree. 13th Click understood why the trees were so evenly spaced, of course. They were set out in a perfect grid, the pattern not broken, but alternated with the rounder and near-skeletal seasonal alteration trees that were supposedly necessary for optimal growth in the forest web. Somehow, between the rigid, unnatural layout of the experimental forest and the fact that the aggressive fir trees were rapidly killing their necessary companion species, and the fact that the humans considered this botanical warfare not only acceptable but natural, the entire situation just made one a little flighty. On top of all that, his rather impressive nasal ridges, which flared and split attractively, were prone to getting stuck in the sap that leaked down from any injury in the tree's outer bark. Once was quite enough times to need to calm for help because his nose was stuck to a tree. "Not so much," his superior answered. "I am just wondering if it is useful to warn you of your foolishness beforehand." 13th Click shot his superior a rather exasperated side-eye. He was truly grateful for all the effort that Two Trills had put into his training. He had truly been a fluffy fledgling despite his university education when he had first been assigned to this research station. Two Trills' calm confidence and quite leadership style had prevented countless unfortunate misunderstanding with their human hosts, and had set 13th Click on a path to build his own family tree much faster than he would have been able to do otherwise. Still, it wasn't strictly necessary for Two Trills to remind him of the fact. "And what foolishness am I about to display?" 13th Click asked with an acidic note in his voice. "Eating whatever the humans are offering us," Two Trills replied in a dry note. The shock of that answer actually caused 13th Click to miss a flap, and he dropped several centimeters through the air before he corrected, shot past his superior, circled twice, and finally snatched at the rough fibers of the tree's bark. Two Trills circled back to his perch with a bemused expression on his face. "What do you mean by that?" 13th Click demanded. "Pardon my sudden updraft, but that really does seem to go against every bit of training I've had. Most notable, the stuff that you gave me." "And what training would that be?" Two Trills asked, settling calmly down beside the agitated 13th Trill. "Humans love to feed us." 13th Click lifted one wing claw in demonstration. "It is a fundamental part of their culture to feed their friends. They are very careful about what foods they share, as a lot of what they eat is toxic. As an officer in an ambassadorial role, it is my duty to eat the food of whatever species is hosting us, because sharing food is almost a universal goodwill ritual. Did I miss anything?" Two Trills heaved a long sigh and ran a wing hook over one sensory horn, as if to express his utter non-surprise at the ignorance on display before him. "You are missing so much," Two Trills said in a gently patronizing tone that made 13th Click positively bristled. Yet the older winged continued as if he hadn't noted the reaction. "Look down there!" Two Trills gestured with a wing hook to the forest floor beneath them. "What don't you see?" 13th Click glanced down. Sure enough, the forest floor was blurry at this height to his eyes. He couldn't see any of the duff and detritus he knew covered the soil, and the intricate network of roots and symbiotes that extended as far down into the dirt as the branches extended above it. "Duff, detritus, fungal growths," he hazarded. "Those irritating little mammalian gliders. Maybe the pellets from the fragile death wings." Two Trills flared his nostrils in confirmation. "In short, the entire ecosystem that exists below your awareness," Two Trills said. "Now the humans have a very similar social ecosystem that is apparently below your awareness at all. You have not yet learned to keep your attention on your sensory horns well enough." "What did I supposedly miss?" 13th Trill asked cautiously. Two Trills was wise in the currents of the humans. It would be best not to let pride deny a lesson. The humans are plotting something, Two Trills said gravely. It is something to do with you specifically eating this food. Even if what you say is true, 13th Click interjected. Is it even possible for me to refuse eating the food? They went to a lot of effort to prepare this party for us. As I said, Two Trills admitted. I was wondering if it was any use to warn you. What makes you think they are plotting anything anyway? 13th Click asked. Not that he disbelieved his superior, but he hadn't noticed anything. Giggling, snickering, odd glances at you that focus on your very equatorial nose frills, Two Trills listed off. 13th Click sniffed, sending his nose frills trembling. Two Trills did have the stubby northern frills in comparison to his own. The humans would have noticed and wondered at it after all. It is odd that they never said anything about my frills, 13th Click said. They are very nice after all. Two Trills gave him an amused and superior look before dropping from the tree and darting away. 13th Click followed in thoughtful chatter. He muttered over the possibilities and potential reasons until they came in sight of the glow of the bonfire the humans had lit in one of the arranged clearings. It was dicey flying getting through the dense branches at the edge of the clearing. The humans tended to just push through them. Then they were out in the open, and the humans greeted them cheerfully. There were about 24 humans scattered around the clearing. 13th Click noted one human ornithologist had one of the tamed deathwings in her lap. She appeared to be massaging the deathwing's talons and crooning to it that it was a good birdie. 13th Click noted with relief that it was secured to a log by strong Jessies before he circled down to the table where the food was stacked. Now, he called out without preamble. If there was humiliation coming best, get it over with. His fears were not soothed when he noted the majority of the humans slide their portable recording devices out of their pockets. Where is the culturally relevant food you were all raving about? He demanded. Right here, lucky old buddy, Human Friend Guy said, pointing to several open canisters on the table. There was a disturbing note of suppressed laughter in his voice. The vats were easily large enough to hold multiple winged, which made them easily handleable for the humans. They contained a thick substance that gave off a not unpleasant fragrance. It was savory and earthy, and almost smelled like it was related to the fungus that the trees depended on. 13th Click felt his nose frills twitch in anticipation and was only mildly disturbed by the suppressed snicker that ran through the crowd. How do I consume it? He asked as Human Friend Guy handed him a proportionate container of the stuff. He was twisting off the lid by the time the larger mammals answered him. Oh, there are a lot of ways, one of the botanists said, a grin twitching at her lips. That is its main selling point, but the easiest way it like this. She demonstrated by taking her spoon and dipping it into one of the jars. She scooped up a large mass of the food. Its consistency meant that a dollop twice the size of 13th Click's head clung to the spoon bowl without falling. She placed the entire mass in her mouth and used her teeth and lips to peel off about half the mass. Several other humans followed suit, all watching him intently. 13th Click was really felling what Two Trills had warned him about now. These humans were just too eager to participate in this. Still, he had caught this thermal. He would ride it to the top. He took a proportionate glob of the stuff and scraped off half with his teeth. It was as good as he had scented. It clearly was a legume with several of its symbiotic fungal species delicately laced into the paste. It had the odd taste that indicate the legumes had been roasted at some point. The texture was a bit dry, though, and 13th Click felt his salivary glands activate to compensate. He went to swallow a bit and realized that this was going to take a bit more time than he had thought. The densely viscous paste was now firmly adhered to the top of his mouth where pulling it off the spoon with his teeth had pushed it. It also coated the roof of his mouth, preventing his saliva from getting between it and said roof. He was going to have to remove small amounts with his tongue, bit by bit. It would be tedious, but the taste was good enough to make up for it. The humans appeared to be using the same strategy from the way their jaws were working. That really didn't do anything to explain why they were all watching him so intently and clearly suppressing laughter. He carefully began to work the mass down his gullet, twisting his tongue and lips this way and that to reach the stuff, and each lick pushed the mass of paste into a new shape. He found himself having to tilt his head from side to side, even twisting his neck to get the proper leverage. The humans, presumably because they had tongues that were as thick as his neck when they wanted to be, were already done and were clearly filming him, and a few had even broken past what self-control they had and were laughing outright. It was vexing but downdraft if he was going to let them know it. His nose frills bobbed energetically in front of his eyes as he reached particularly far forward with his tongue to get at some paste stuck behind his top teeth, obscuring his view of the snickering humans. At that, the majority of their self-control broke down, and the clearing erupted in howls. The Deathwing gave a startled hoot and flapped up to sit on a makeshift perch its handler had erected. 13th Click grimly toiled on clearing his mouth until he could speak clearly again. "Quite delightful," he commented, glaring around at the gasping and snickering mass of humanity. Then, keeping eye contact with human friend Guy, he calmly shoved the second mouthful past his jaws as he had seen the humans do. The humans let out hoots of approval, and the laughter erupted in earnest again. 13th Click still had no idea why this was so funny. But by the mother tree, if any of those videos went viral, he was demanding a cut of the profits. Humans are weird latest challenge. 7th Trill looked across the empty space between himself and second sister. He was perched in front of the massive window that formed the south wall of the commander's office on this post. In the fading colors of the gloaming, the rolling grasslands outside stretched to the perimeter fence and then beyond it to the horizon. With the office, the interior lights were just starting to compensate for the fading natural light. The Shartar was standing there with her arms full of medical supplies and the pouches that hung from her utility harness bulging with sterile, absorbent material. 7th Trill, slowly and deliberate, placed his wing hooks on either side of his snout and cycled a deep sigh of air. "Let me get the wake in order," 7th Trill said in what he hoped the medic took to be a firm tone. "You are taking a quarter of the base's medical supplies out into the middle of a field because the predator deterrent has expired?" Second sister curled an antenna in what he assumed was a gesture that meant something to someone who had lighted on Shartar kinesics for more than a moment. She seemed to realize the problem, however. "Yes," she explained. "I really should be getting out there now." The Shartar shifted her legs as if to turn and go, but 7th Trill held up a wing hook to restrain her. "I seem to be missing critical information," he said, straining to keep his voice calm. "I do not see any connection at all between the predicted and allowed for chemical degradation of the—" He glanced at the manifest in front of him. "Pepper spray and wasting, or rather using in a less that prescribed manner, let's say, a large mass of the base medical supplies." He paused and waited for the Shartar to respond. Her neck frill had stiffened and flared green with anger for a moment before shifting to the fluttering of general curiosity. Her head slowly rotated from side to side, threatening to dislodge the topmost of the medical supplies in her arms. "What exactly," she finally asked, "do you think I'm going to do with these medical supplies?" "I am sure as a rising thermal that I have not the faintest breeze of an idea," he stated. "I am reasonably certain that you do not intend to retrofit them into ranged chemical predator deterrents, but that is the only implication I could lift from your explanation." For a long moment, the Shartar focused on him, letting her faceted eyes rotate to really analyze him from every direction. Her mandibles worked quietly, and he got the distinct impression that she was wondering how someone of his intelligence had managed to learn to fly, let alone rise to a command rank in a deep space field outpost. Finally, she shook out her antenna and frill and glanced at the wall-mounted chronometer. "Yes," she murmured. "That would explain how this happened. You haven't had any experience with humans, have you?" He bristled a little in affront. "I have not," he said. "Though I fail to feel how that applies here. The pepper spray is a human use tool," she explained. "They developed it from an anti-herbivory chemical produced by various plants on their homeworld. The defense units that have just expired were engineered for the use of the various species, but the humans still feel a proprietary interest in them." "That is interesting," 7th Trill said cautiously. "They also have a range of culturally relevant activities that include these substances," second sister went on. "In addition, they have a scarcity-driven distaste for waste." 7th Trill truly wondered where she was going with this spiral of information. He well knew that Shartar in general tended to be very literal and direct. It was on of the aggravating things about dealing with them. "While I have no direct evidence," she was going on, "I have gathered from the fact that all of the expired units are missing with most of the base humans that they have gone off into the fields for a related recreational activity." "Ah." A dim light began to pierce the clouds of her explanation, and he nodded slowly. "They are using the expired units for target practice. Commendable initiative." Second sister's triangular head tilted to the side, and one antenna curled in what might have been amusement. "Target practice?" she repeated. That is perhaps one of the more charitable ways of describing what I expect they have been doing, but only if you consider their faces to be the targets. The silence stretched between them as more and more the artificial light took over. The unnatural light began to savor of something quite unpleasant as Seventh Trill caught up to her meaning. "What makes you think that the humans would be that—" He broke off. There was really no polite way to say stupid in any language. "They haven't returned and it is meal time," she explained. "Young, healthy mammals, even tanks like the humans, do not willingly skip meals. Their metabolisms punish them quickly for such slights. Therefore, something is keeping them out past the security fence." "What do you suspect is delaying them?" he asked. "If I had to diagnose without direct evidence, I would say collective partial blindness and needing to feel their way home as a group like a pod of ungulates," she explained in a calm tone. "Why wouldn't they just call in?" Seventh Trill demanded. "Embarrassment," Second Sister stated calmly. "Now, if you will excuse me, I'm having a medical-grade eye solvent loaded into the drip tank on the back of my hovercraft. That and these should be enough to provide first aid when I find the fools." She set out a foot and pivoted her body before trotting out of the office without another backwards glance. Seventh Trill watched her go and wondered how Hugh was supposed to write this incident up in his report. "Humans are weird, feedable, fensible fecund. And when we determined that they had a 5-sol reproductive cycle, we realized that they were pretty much the perfect candidate for domestication." Human friend Freddy was enthusiastically going on about the animals in the confinement space as she shifted the compressed bundles of ground cover fibers that were to serve as the animals' feed for the projected long winter the humans were preparing the base for. Lifts significantly shifted her, to be honest, mostly ornamental radiation shield, and gripped the single stem of ground cover fiber so that it projected from her gripping end at the appropriate angle. She still wasn't quite sure why the fashion was to hold the stem like that. The straw hat made sense. It was easy to shape the fibers into disposable and compostable radiation shields, and even if it only covered about half of her length, the ori gin of the fashion was easy to understand when you saw the harsh dry and sun playing over the humans' bodies, and the humans were clearly delighted to share the fashion with their smaller and less bipedal allies. The stem, however, was to mimic the one humans held in their mouths when they were examining domestic livestock, and the purpose of that remained a mystery. The only fragment of an explanation she had gotten was when human friend Lee had laughed and made a joke about keeping away terror ghosts. However, the humans were even more delighted to share this fashion than the other, so she aligned the stem and sprawled herself more comfortably over the edge of the water trough. "You sure that it's safe for you to be in there?" human friend Freddy asked, interrupting her soliloquy on how perfect this new species of mammal was to glance down at Lift significantly in concern. "There are no shared parasites that could possibly jump the species barrier," Lift significantly said firmly for the 12th time. "I know that this is a grievous concern for you, but remember that my species is all but invulnerable to cross-species parasite drift. We have to be to live in the water our entire lives." "Yeah," human friend Freddy conceded. "You guys are basically sharks when it come right down to that." The human grinned to herself, presumably at the absurdity of a comparison between Lift's significantly soft, cuddly body and the hydrodynamic nightmare of teeth and cartilage that was one of her homeworld's sharks. "Speaking of the danger," the human said, glancing up at one of the approaching animals. The beast lumbered along on 4 legs. A quadruped, the humans called this landform. Its legs ended in thick pads that gave it exceptional traction on a variety of surfaces. It had a short, thick neck at one end of its body that was ringed around with a mane of sensory tendrils. 4 directional eyes peep out of their soft mass, and a lopsided mouth opened to reveal flat teeth and a long, inquisitive tongue. The other end sprouted a tail and a matching cluster of sensory tendrils. "Yes, you drive the ecologists back at the university mad, don't you?" human friend Freddy crooned as she reached over to rub the animal at the base of its cranial sensory tendril cluster. Lift significantly fought down a surge of jealousy. These animals might be prime candidates for domestication, but they were still several generations from being truly domesticated. The humans needed to give it all the positive reinforcement they could until they could select for the proper neonatal behavior genes. Still, it did cut into the time their friends spent rubbing the ungulates. A bit of resentment wasn't logical, but it was unavoidable. 4 directional eyes, and as far as any of us can tell, a true and complete grazing herbivore, human friend Freddy went on. Not one observed reason in your natural history for you to need directional vision, and plenty to make a more horsey eye set more logical. If the beast objected to her analysis of its sensory organs, it didn't show in the low, contented sounds it made as it lapped up the water over Lift Significantly's lagging end. "Why are you so enthusiastic over this animal human friend Freddy?" Lift Significantly finally asked. "Because they are cool," human friend Freddy said in a rather perplexed tone. "Perfect for a domesticated pack animal." "Yes," Lift Significantly agreed. "You have gone over that in depth. They are easy to feed even over the winter months. They are easy to contain because they cannot escape fences. They produce offspring at a rate that does not overwhelm your created environments, but is fast enough to ensure a viable breeding population in an acceptable time frame." "Feedable, fenceable, fecund," human friend Freddy agreed. "So what's your question?" "You did not show nearly a similar interest in the lumberbacks," Lift Significantly pointed out. Human friend. Freddy paused and frowned for a moment as she processed that. "That's true," she said slowly. Then her face broke out into a grin. "It's the spine!" she said with the light of revelation flashing over her exposed skin. "The spine?" Lift Significantly asked. "The lumberbacks had a fragile spine," human friend Freddy said. "You can stack literal tons inside saddles, but nothing can sit directly on their spines, and to top that off, they were slow, and they, well, lumbered." "Why is the defining factor the ability to place weight on the spine?" Lift Significantly asked. Human friend Freddy's face broke into a broad grin, and Lift Significantly felt a flicker of unease. "Watch this!" the human called out, and the flicker caused Lift Significantly to stiffen in real fight. Human friend, Freddy leapt into the pen with the half-domesticated beast, and then leapt onto its back with a delighted yell. There the human stayed as the beast gave a startled jump and proceeded to spin and race across the field with the human passenger yelling all the way. Lift Significantly pondered over the question of if this was supposed to answer her question as she reached for her comm unit. "Base control?" she asked. The Shatar on duty answered immediately. "Please transfer me to the local human expert," Lift Significantly requested. "One of the humans just told me to watch this." She was transferred immediately.